of Liberty podcast, where we are uncompromising in our principles and put liberty first, always.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. I am your host, Redbeard, and as you all can see, I have the awesome Tom Eddlem back to do an economic segment, and I do feel like the economic situation is pretty tumultuous right now. But before we get into that and introducing Tom, just a little bit of housekeeping. Just a reminder that on September 17th, I'm going to be having back on Scott Horton to go over the Russia-Ukraine conflict, a lot of the fallout that's coming from that, both on the United States, but also in Western Europe, what that's going to look like, how it's going to shape, just different outcomes and potentially the way forward as it pertains to the EU, NATO, and unfortunately, as everybody knows, we are basically kind of tied at the hip with those organizations, even as much as some people might not think that with some of the things that Trump says. While I do think that it's important to listen to what he says, it is even more important to watch what he does, as well as many others in the administration. So come check us out on September 17th, and that's going to be at 12 p.m. If I'm getting this date right, or the time right, I believe it's 12 p.m. or, well, I'll post the times. I have to double check the times. I'm already flubbing my own intro. I'm not going to destroy it any further. Anyway, September 17th, I'll post the dates and times in the description below. Tom, thank you so much for coming back, man. It is great. For those of you who don't know, Tom does a lot of really good pieces for the Libertarian Institute. He's done a little bit of writing here and there for a few other places as well, but he is what I like to call my economics guy, and he is gracious enough to come back and give us some of his knowledge as it pertains to the economy. So, Tom, thank you for coming back. If you'd like to promote your podcast as well and some of the works that you do, please feel free to do that. I will give you the floor to start. So,
all right. Well, thank you. Thank you a lot, Jeremy. I can't promote my own podcast right now because I've temporarily suspended it. That maybe the listeners don't know, but I got cancer right around Christmas last year, and of the mouth. I usually, people have told me I had diarrhea of the mouth, but now I actually got cancer. Okay. So, but I had an operation, I had chemo, I had radiation, all that stuff. That's why I'm still slurring my speech a little bit. And I still have some, a little bit of swelling, but I think it's gone. And I wanted to get back into the podcasting game. So I said, all right, I'll do a guest host. But if you want me to promote something, hey, I'm always writing at the Libertarian Institute. Yeah. I had a piece this week. There's a good chance I'll have a piece next week. I'm going to send it off. So if it doesn't appear next week, it'll be the following. And definitely check those out. And my podcast will be up and running once my mouth is 100%. The rest of my body is 100%, as far as I know. But my podcast, I do want to do it again. So there we go.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, and just to add one little point to that, the recent article that you published, I will be putting it in the description down below for each and every person to be able to take a minute out of their day to go through it, read it, and see what Tom has to say. But we are going to be covering parts of your article here tonight, if not a good portion of it, and kind of going over some of the things that you discussed there. It was a great article. I really enjoyed taking the time to kind of go through it and read it and see what you had to say, as always. And I'm really looking forward to the one that you're going to be putting out here in the next week or so. So, so I will have that for you guys to go and check out. So, Tom, I just want to start. As you and I were talking before we began the episode, I don't know why, but this couldn't have been a better time to have you on, because it seems like after crossing the 40 trillion threshold, along with the conversation around tacos and how supposedly it's younger people's faults that you're not working hard enough, and It's your fault. It's a younger person's fault why you can't afford a house, and the quote unquote affordability crisis, and so many other things. I mean, I barely even touched the surface on this, and we're going to get more into that. But just to start, like, what in the world do you make of all of this before we jump into this?
Well, I mean, as far as the economy, it's in chaos because we have a president who is chaotic. I mean, Donald Trump announced 50% tariffs on goods from Canada today. 50%. Now we get most of our wood from Canada, right? It's a forested country, and we don't have as much forest. We produce a lot of lumber too, but that means house building costs are going to go up. That means almost everything's going to go up. And the interesting thing is a lot of Trump supporters will say, "Oh no, the foreign importer pays the tariff." That's we'll make the foreign importer pays the tariff. Well, two counterpoints to that are in the news recently. One, the studies show that the American consumer paid more, and then when the Supreme Court struck down most of Trump's tariffs earlier this spring, it was the foreign importer that got the rebate. Right. So we were paying twice. Excuse me. We were paying for the higher prices at the pump, at the supermarket, at the department store, online, and we're paying taxes to refund the importers. Also, right. One other thing, Donald Trump about this very week, said in order to bring price relief to Americans on beef, he's going to lower the price of imported beef.
Yeah, I saw that. Yep.
He admitted higher tariffs cause higher prices, which of course is the truth. It's absolutely the truth. So, I make of it, that he's a man of chaos. He doesn't consult with Congress when he makes laws, increases taxes. That's just what it is. As far as the economy, I mean, I think we're going to plod along, not very well. I don't predict a recession unless this war in Iran really ramps up. But I don't, as dumb as the people in Washington are, I don't think they're quite that dumb. Sure. So I think they'll mess it up, but not that much. So my prediction is not a recession or a major recession in the next year. But it's going to hurt the economy. It's going to hurt growth. And what's going to hurt mostly is young people. I mean,
sure.
I post this thing online about how inflation and all these different policies the federal government has are hurting young people, and the young people today are having a tough time getting by. They can't buy a house as much. They can't do all of these things. And the standard response from both conservatives and libertarians is, "Oh, why are you blaming government for your failure?" Well, first of all,
that is something I've seen a lot.
Difference, the difference between the two of us, I would say, I say is not that you're doing well and I'm doing poorly. I'm fine, and my kids who are grown up are fine, but the majority of kids are not fine, and it's not entirely their fault. It's the fault of our policies. And that's what I have to, that's my emphasis.
Yeah. No. And I think that, it's one of those conversations I've seen come up a lot more often, which is essentially there is this idea, right, to where it's just like, oh, well, if you just worked harder, if you just put your nose to the grindstone a little bit more, if you just did this, if you just did that, there is kind of a mentality there that I think you've seen through the generations. It does become one of those things, and you've kind of alluded to this in your article, which is, okay, but like, what is the baseline we're also comparing things to? Because if we're comparing it to like 50, 60 years ago, and we're using that as kind of a scale, and then we're looking at a lot of other things that are taking place today, I know a lot of younger people that are working their butts off. They're working 2, 3, 4 jobs even just to be able to pay rent for their apartment. That's not including groceries. That's not including other expenses. And they're doing everything they possibly can to kind of eke out their spot in life and society and trying to do the right things. But it's becoming much more difficult with the circumstances that we're in. And we'll probably get more and more into this as we go regarding the baseline point that you made. But when you look at that particular point in general, you also pointed out things like housing. You also pointed out things like expense, which I thought it is kind of dramatic, isn't it? I mean, when you look at what people used to buy a home for, much less a vehicle, versus today, and then you kind of examine a few things, there's some pretty interesting points there, no?
Yeah, the piece I wrote for the Libertarian Institute this week, it was kind of a long piece because I went over a lot of the, how do I put it, the false propaganda points or the misleading propaganda points for what I called the Libertarian Prosperity Church or the Libertarian Prosperity Gospel. And basically the gospel is this generation is the best, has it the best. They're working the least. They're making the most. They're, they have it. And it's not true. It's not true.
Yeah.
All right. But they have statistics to prove it's true. But the statistics are manipulated. They're misleading. And, one of them is baselining everything from the boomer generation, because if you look at economic growth and prosperity of generations, the greatest generation, silent generation, the boomer generation, they all advanced and got richer than their parents. All of them very quickly, very, very quickly. And for Gen X, which I'm an older Gen X, and millennials and now Zoomers, it's been glacial. It's been really slow. But, you could argue we're a bit better off than the boomers, or the Zoomers are a little bit better off than the boomers. But you can also argue that they were a little worse off because there are trends going the other way too.
For sure.
And so if you baseline all of the data in the boomers, you're thinking, oh, everything's getting better. But in fact,
yeah.
They're stultified. We're stuck in the sand, and we've been running our tires in the sand since early 1970s. In the comments, a couple of guys are saying end the Fed. Yeah, because the Fed took us off the gold standard in 1971. Absolutely. So since then, the share, what the highest point of U.S. labor taking the percentage of wages being a percentage of GDP was 1969. At that point, it was over 51%. Now it's down below 42%. All right, that's $4 trillion difference. If we were at 52%, like we were in 1969, workers would be getting another $4.2 trillion than they are today. Okay, well, why is that? Well, it's inflation, it's interest rate manipulation, it's all of the cronyism that's going on. In almost every industry, but I go over that mainlining it or baselining it in the boomer generation is one of the ways they use to imply things are still getting better, even though they're not. Go ahead.
Well, and I just wanted to point or to put this in there too, and hopefully you can touch on this as well. But one of the other things that I've seen, especially as it pertains to, because we're talking also the boomers, is there's also boomers that are kind of not doing very well now too. Whereas like maybe a couple of years ago they were doing okay, but it's like, and obviously there's a number of factors. The Rona really did a number, I think, in general on people. But for the most part, the boomers were doing pretty good, and there still are a lot of boomers that are fairly well off, albeit. I think there's also another conversation to be had there, but I like to, just to give some context to why I'm saying this. I tend to watch a few different channels as it pertains to buying habits, whether it's homes, whether it's vehicles, whatever the case is. And what I've seen a lot of, what I've seen pattern wise is the fact that you're having more boomers kind of almost going back into the workforce. They're barely able to make their payments. The payments are going up, up, up. And that really nice cushion that they thought that they had is becoming exponentially smaller and not very slow at a pretty high rate, it seems like. And I could be wrong in that evaluation, but it does seem like now the generation that seemed like they were pretty comfortable, it's almost as if there's kind of that reckoning that's coming back to the point to where that comfort for at least some of them is kind of being rug pulled out from underneath them. And I'm never going to sit here and cheer like some people do about like, that's what you get. It's like, no, like that's not great, because that'll eventually spread to everybody. No.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the boomers who bought their houses in the 70s and 80s for $50,000 or less,
Yeah.
you know, and now they're worth $500,000. You know, they're doing well unless they lost their house and they
Right.
lost their job, and you know, then they're going to be struggling. But you know, and it's tough for an older person to, you know, get a new job if they're out of a job. You know, I think it's tougher for an older person than a younger person.
Absolutely.
But in general, the boomers are doing okay, because even if they lose their house, they typically have a lot of equity in it, and then you know, they have a couple $100,000 to play with, compared to someone out of college who doesn't have the couple $100,000, but they have a couple $100,000 in college debt.
Sure.
You know.
Yep.
So that's a big difference. But for the most part, the boomers are doing better. But yeah, you're right. There's always going to be the outliers, and the outliers are not 10 people. It's 10, 20, 30% of them. But for the most part, the boomers are all right. But it's the younger ones, especially the Zoomers and the millennials who are struggling. You know, they're less likely to own a home. They're finding it difficult to get a job. So you know, we got a question in the comments. How do they lose their house? Taxation.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you lose a house the same way you lose anything. You lose your job, and you lose a source of income you have to make the mortgage payment, and you get behind, and the bank forecloses. I think that's happening to you know, a number of boomers. A lot of them are set up anyway where they lose their job and they're still going to be fine, because you know, most of them are at Social Security age. I'm a millennial, and I'm only a few years away from Social. I'm not a millennial. I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm not that many years away from getting Social Security. I mean, I'm 60 years old, so I could get it in a year and a half if I wanted to. So I mean, you know, a lot of the boomers have options, most of them. But I think if you lose your income, you know, and you don't have any sort of a padding or enough of a padding, then you have a problem. But again, I think the boomers are generally okay.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I do think that is the pretty general consensus, and I just thought it was kind of interesting how, you know, you are starting to see some of them to where it's just like, man, you know, I mean, that I guess maybe that's why you shouldn't become overly comfortable with a situation. It's like, okay, you know, we're doing pretty good, but I think complacency has a tendency to kind of change the mood for certain things, and I think when we look at the progression of how things go, you know, it's like, I don't know, maybe it does produce some type of perspective as things continue to degrade or potentially get worse in certain areas. Maybe more people will have, I don't want to use the word appreciation, but at least an understanding of like, okay, maybe there's a point to some of the Zoomers. Maybe there's a point to some of these younger kids to where it's just like, hey man, you know, like it's rough out here. One thing I did want to put out your way is the other thing that I've noticed as well, and perhaps we can kind of maybe fold this a little bit into the taco argument, the $20 taco argument, right? Or $20 burrito, whatever somebody likes. But we live also in a very heavily financed society to where, and I've been saying this for quite some time, the past few months, I would say, where I look around and I as a driver, I'm not going to be super specific, but as a place who brings things to people, you do tend to notice that there's some really nice houses, there's some really nice land, there's some really nice vehicles. And I do feel like to some degree, I'm not saying entirely, but to some degree, it's like, man, I bet there's a portion of this that's financed. And I was just watching a couple different channels, again, about like housing and vehicles. And they were talking about like how common it is, even for very well-off people, to finance a vehicle at times. Not all of them. There's a large portion of people who can just pay it. But it is amazing how under some people really are when it comes to financing. And they just continue to buy more, continue to get more. Before you know it, you're $250,000 in debt, and you're now looking at a lifetime of paying that off. And I don't think that's generally a younger person issue. I think it's a pretty general issue. How does that also factor into the grand scheme of things in terms of people being able to kind of get out of this hole, or to be able to adjust or adapt to an economy that seems to be getting worse? I mean, because it seems like there's kind of a problem there with financing so many things. I don't know. Maybe I'm seeing it wrong.
I don't know. I mean, if you go into a wealthier neighborhood, yeah, there are a lot of people that finance a lot of stuff, and they charge up a fortune on their credit cards, and they, I think in general, even the wealthy do buy their house on credit. They have a mortgage. Yeah. There's all kinds of tax incentives to do it. Sure. So paying cash for a house is almost unheard of. So they if you buy a big house and you max out your salary in a house, you're putting yourself at risk, at least for the first few years. After that, as the mortgage gets paid down, you're not as much of a risk. And of course, inflation eats away at the payment you have to make too. Sure. It gets a lot easier. I mean, I still remember when I moved out of my house back in 1989, I went to Wisconsin. And I said, Dad, I got this great apartment. It's only $290 a month. It's right across the river from the Lawrence University. It's great. Yeah. It's great. And the old dude went white. He said, that's more than my mortgage. And he's got this huge 4-bedroom colonial in the Boston area that right now is worth close to $1 million. And he was paying less than $290 a month for it because he bought it in 1971. Before all the inflation. So it gets a lot easier to pay as you go along. But I mean, I think some people just are not responsible about their money. Yeah. But I don't think this is primarily an issue about individuals being responsible with money. It's about government being irresponsible with money. Sure. That's why. The individuals haven't gotten dumber. It's the government that's gotten worse. And that's the problem. And the prosperity gospel people, both in the Trump MAGA people and the libertarians, are saying, oh, but the young people, they're working less, and that's been the old people saying since time immemorial. And you know what? In the boomer generation, that was absolutely true. They worked less than their parents, and they were still richer. All right. That is not the case now. All right. People, if you compare to the boomer generation to Zoomers and millennials today, Zoomers and millennials are working more. But you read something from the Cato Institute's, what is their thing? It's like global prosperity, some project they have. And they say, did you know that the average worker today is working 20% less, working an average of 20% fewer hours. And they're right about that. Yeah. So how can both things be true? Well, if you look at the averages, they're using averages. They're not using medians. And what happened between the boomer generation and really even my generation, Gen X, women started going into the workforce, and they started going in part-time. So if you have a family you know, and the husband's working 40 hours a week, well, the average is 40 hours a week. But if the wife comes in and starts working 20 hours a week, guess what? The average drops by 25%. They're only working an average of 30 hours a week. And that's the statistics that the Cato Institute's peddling, saying they're working less. See, they have lots more leisure time. But it's not true. It's not true, because women are more likely to work in the workforce. So they're working harder, they're working more hours, and they're better educated. The proportion of workers in the workforce who have a college degree tripled since the boomer generation.
Wow.
Why hasn't prosperity increased?
Yeah.
Why haven't wages increased? You know, they've gone up a little bit, but not much. Maybe 10% since 1971. Do you know what they went up between 1946 and 1971? Half the time period? 50%.
Wow.
All right, that's after inflation too.
Yeah.
That's not even counting inflation. But since then, since 1971, so in 25 years they went up 50%. In the 50-something years since then, 55 years, they've gone up 10% wages. Why is that? Is that the natural market? No, it's not. It's the Federal Reserve printing more money, you know, and the cancel-on effect of who's the last one to get the new money? It's the worker. You know, it goes, government gets it first, they get the best benefit, then the finance industry gets it, then the businesses get it, and finally the worker gets it. All right. So who's benefited? Oh, gee, what a coincidence. The finance industry is the highest proportion of the economy that it's ever been in the age of inflation, right? Because they're just printing all the money and it goes to the finance industry.
Sure.
You know, so this isn't markets. It's not the failure of the free market, and it's not a failure of young kids who aren't working hard enough. They're working harder than ever.
Yeah.
They're working harder than ever because their money is being stolen by the Federal Reserve Bank.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, and just to go on top of that, and we've kind of hit, I think we've kind of hit on it a little bit, but all of these different things considered, and you look at how so much of that's been stolen from so many people, right? It's then you have to add in the price of food, the price of basic living necessities, the price of gas and diesel and other things that are required to get us to said job and to go to work, to go make the money, to have that money basically taken from us and to be left with a meager amount in which to pretty much just be left in a cycle to where it's like we go, we come back home, we go, we come back home, then it's shopping day. I know a lot of people who have pretty much dedicated one day a week on which they go shopping. Some people do it every 2 weeks, but it, you know, before, like growing up, I remember we used to be able to, you know, my parents would be able to just go and to the grocery store, do whatever they needed to do any day of the week. It didn't really matter too much because they, you know, we certainly weren't rich in my household growing up, but, you know, there was some flexibility. My parents didn't have to signal out or, you know, section out one day of the week to be like, okay, this is the day we do everything. And now I know a lot of people that are like, okay, well, this is the day of the week we're going. This is how much we're allotting ourselves to be able to go buy. We get what we can get and we go back home because we don't have anything else to spend. And so it really seems like just a tumultuous cycle that so many people are stuck in, and they don't know how to get out of it. You know, despite what they might try and do, despite trying to pick up more hours, despite trying to be a little bit more savvy and spread their money around, I think a lot of people really feel boxed in. And there again, you know, you have these people that are just like, oh, you just got to work harder. You just got to put more time in. You just got to do this. It's like, yeah, except there's a lot of younger people. There's a lot of, you know, people around my age too, and even your age and everything in between, where a number of us do have a lot of working experience. We do have a lot of knowledge. We do have a lot that we can contribute. And to many degrees, it kind of doesn't seem to matter. And I know there's a lot of people that say, well, you know, for the younger people, you just don't have the experience. It's like, yeah, except the problem is I know guys that have experience, and they still can't find a job in which they should be properly paid for that experience. So I think there's a lot really folding into this, right?
Yeah, and in libertarian circles, the main message a lot of times is, well, you shouldn't be looking for a job. You should be building your own business and be an entrepreneur. And they're like, that's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And
it's so easy too, right, Tom?
No, it's very difficult. And God bless the people who do it.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is, everyone shouldn't have to be their own entrepreneur for the economy to grow.
Yeah.
That's not how the free market works.
Mm-hmm.
That, oh, well, all these jobs they used to be really good paying, and you could support a family on one income, and you get better every year. All of a sudden, well, those jobs don't pay enough to live on anymore. So you have to become an entrepreneur. That's progress. No, it's not progress. All right. I'm not saying we need to adjust the free market to force everybody back into these corporate jobs. But the point is, the reason those jobs are disappearing is not because of the free market. It's because of government policies. And there's my upcoming book. I've tentatively called it mugging the mundanes, sort of like robbing the common people.
Yeah.
We'll see if that ends up being the final. Yeah, I may think of a better one, but
sure.
But that if you look at almost any industry, it's controlled by government and government subsidies. And it's not just Elon Musk getting $38 billion from the government to build up Tesla and his rocket company. It's big pharma. It's big ag. It's all the way across, high tech, the tech industry. Silicon Valley used to be the paragon of free market. It's not anymore.
Kind of the cream of the crop almost.
It's all laced with government subsidies, government contracts. You look at Amazon, they've got more than half a dozen multi-billion-dollar contracts right now. And it's easy to say, well, you're just criticizing the billionaires because you're not successful. Well, no. If you give someone billions of dollars, they become a billionaire. It becomes pretty easy once you give them billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And getting that through to conservatives and libertarians is kind of tough. But you know what? That's the difference between libertarians and conservatives winning elections and becoming a rounding error in elections. Because as long as they're telling millennials who are trying their hardest and Zoomers who are trying their hardest and working harder than their parents, that they're just dumb, they're not trying hard enough, that's not going to win them. That's why all of these Democrats are winning these Democratic socialists are winning primaries all around the country, because the Republicans and the Libertarians are saying, stop buying $20 burritos and buy some ramen and get a job. Yeah. And the socialists are saying, it's not your fault. We know you're trying, and what we want you to do is try something different. And it's dumb different. It's a really dumb different.
Oh, for sure.
But at least they're talking about the problem.
It is something that amazes me, especially, and especially from a person, I tend to consider myself a fairly libertarian leaning. I would say, and for the most part, that's more where I'm at, and I'm a very, very liberty oriented person, and and there is something that's kind of it's kind of off putting, to where it's like you do see a segment of people, and obviously you see this in the conservative realm too, but it's like there really isn't this idea of like at least being like, is it just me, or do I get the sense that they have a hard time empathizing with people? Some of these individuals between the conservatives and the libertarians, where it's like, hey man, like, I know you're going through it right now, and you're right. Yeah, there are some glaring issues, and far be it for me to tell you how hard you've been working. I mean, you probably are doing as much as you possibly can. So we got to try and figure this out. And like you said, that is where the socialists are just kind of sweeping things, because it's like people feel heard. And if you can't make people feel heard, you're not going to win. I hate to say it, and it might seem very reductionist, but that is kind of the part of like being able to run a successful campaign, to where it's like you have to at least be able to make people feel heard, feel like they can kind of complain a little bit, and then they're looking for at least a little bit of empathy. And for whatever reason, it's like there's segments that are just, I don't know if they're just afraid or they don't want to approach that. But to me, it's like, especially if you're trying to get a segment of the population that might have an opposing point of view over to your side, maybe if you just took a minute, you sat down with the people you can rationally have a conversation with and be like, hey man, what's going on? Let's talk about this. Let's see if we can figure this stuff out together. I think you're right when you point that out, because it's I mean, the trend that we're seeing right now, especially with Mamdani and several others, I don't know. I mean, people can say all they want, but it kind of doesn't lie, does it?
No, you put your finger right on the pulse there when you said about empathy, because what I should be saying to those people on Facebook or wherever I run into on social media who say, no, they just need to work. You're just, you're just making excuses for people who are lazy and dumb and unsuccessful. I'm like, no. Or sometimes they blame it on me and say, well, you're just poor or whatever. I'm like, no, I'm not poor. You're not poor.
I love
it's just that I have empathy and you don't have empathy. All right. That's the difference. And, it was interesting. The last couple of days, Trump's vice president, J.D. Vance, has kind of taken that tact a little bit by saying, we can't just, overcome this way. And let's face it, this is why Trump got into office. He went into the Midwest, the Rust Belt, and said, the Democrats had all these policies that are hurting you. The jobs left, they're hurting you. Now, his facts weren't right. He blamed everything on the Democrats. But the basic point was he's trying to empathize, and that's what got him elected. Yeah. And what I see in the conservatives and libertarians today is, I don't have any empathy. They're all just a bunch of losers complaining. It's like, no, dude, don't you see? This is your perfect entryway to explain what the problem is and why government's the problem. But they don't see it. They don't see it.
It is astonishing. And it's amazing to me how you do have people that the only argument they have when you point stuff like this out is, like, oh, you must be poor. You're complaining because you're jealous or this. It's like, my dude, like, I have my own house. I have a truck. I have a variety of different things. I'm pretty comfortable, like, I'm not where I would like to be, but I'm relatively okay, but all that being said, I don't have to prove anything to you. Like, you're just pointing out something to deviate from the point that's being made. And really, it just is kind of showing that you don't really have any interest in trying to deal with the issue, which is the issue is, and it's not even just economics. You could take this in terms of war. You could take this in terms of surveillance. You could take this in terms of a lot of different things, which is at least taking the time to empathize and understand the complaints of the people is kind of important. I mean, it's, and again, people just seem to want to just like stay away, like almost as if like empathy. And I'm not I'm not talking about, like detrimental empathy, but it's like, to some degree, it's like you have to kind of pay attention to this stuff, I mean, because if you don't, then you're just going to miss the forest for the trees, and you're just going to be the kind of guy that's just like, oh, empathy is weak and we can't afford to be weak. It's like, well, you literally can't be in a more weak position than you already are, and you're failing to see what you can do to get yourself out of it. And I think when it comes to the economic side of things, I mean, quite frankly, the advocates or the supposed advocates of capitalism or a free market that seem to be the ones that think everybody just needs to work harder. Well, that's why you're losing, because you're not taking the time to see what the real situation is here. And I've always tried to lead to the best of my ability with some form of empathy for the, the person I might be talking with, right? Like, hey, totally understand. Your life is different than my life, and I can't sit here and compare my situation necessarily with your situation in its entirety, because I don't know what's going on in your life. And I think, I think that's a huge component of things that are just kind of broken right now, man. And I wish it were different, because I really do believe in the free market. I believe in very much the Austrian style of economics. I think there is a lot of viability there. I think it's, quite frankly, from everything that I've seen, and I don't consider myself an expert, but it seems to be the most effective way forward. But that's just me. And when you can't even approach somebody, it makes it very hard to make that case.
Right. I mean, let's face it. The politics in America are, it's about the inverse of empathy, right? It's about creating villains, right?
Yeah.
We go to war with Iran, all of a sudden, well, we've been at war with them for 47 years. In fact, not just with Iran, we're at war with all of Islam, 2 billion people. We've been at war with them for no, we're not. No, we're not.
And Cuba and a whole bunch of other people. Yeah.
And
just whatever the flavor of the day is.
And of course, right now, the flavor of the day is democratic socialism. Oh, let's fear Zoran Mandami and opening up 5 grocery stores in New York City. I'm like, what? You're afraid of that? I mean, that's already been tested. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
All right. I mean,
we know it's going to fail.
Who cares if 5 grocery stores, if they ever open? Because let's face it, the Democrats are terrible about enacting socialism.
Yeah.
Obama got a mandate, an electoral mandate, to do a public option, and he got the House and the Senate, control the Senate, and he still didn't do it. All right. Mandami, maybe he'll do it. Maybe he'll enact the 5 stores. None of them are going to open till the end of next year at the earliest. But let's say he does. They'll lose money, just like all the other times it's been tried. And it'll be a great case example of why not to do that. But when you look at Republicans, they're like, oh, we don't like socialism. Well, what's Trump doing right now? He's buying up corporate assets all around the country. He's taking Chinese-style golden shares in companies like U.S. Steel, where the government gets to control and gets veto powers over U.S. Steel. I mean, that's socialism. Socialism is defined as government ownership and control of the means of production. If the federal government has even a 1% share in U.S. Steel and a veto power over its policies on the board, then that's ownership and control. Now, it's not 100% ownership and control, but guess what? The Democrats never gave us that. They never gave us that kind of socialism. In fact, past Republicans never gave us that kind of socialism. This is a new kind of socialism. And guess what? The Republicans, they're not opposing it. They're all for it. Oh, this is going to be great for the economy because the government's running our major corporations.
Right.
They'll run the corporations into the ground if they can.
Oh, for sure.
That's how it works.
Yeah. I like what Don't Tread on Me says. It's like they love socialism as long as it's their brand of it. And I don't.
That's right.
I personally don't think that could be any more true. That's a great point. And I'm happy you kind of went this way, because I wanted to make sure we took some time. I thought this point at the very end of your article was really good. And you had pointed out that when it came down to capitalism and free market capitalism, there was a point in there that you had kind of explained, and I'll let you elaborate on this, but it's really more of a crony capitalism type system. And then you had brought up the point about fascism. And I know we had a conversation about fascism before as well, but I want you to touch on that a little bit more, because I think that's important, because one of the big arguments that we see a lot of the socialists saying is like, oh, the capitalist system is what's ruining this country, and it's what's ruining lives, and it's the detriment of the person. and all of this. And I know it sounds really like beaten to a pulp, but in all intents and purposes, we are not under the system of capitalism that we were intended to have, correct?
That's right. I mean, we would like to go back to the idea. Maybe we never were 100%, but we were 90, 95% back before the New Deal. Before it would have to go back almost 100 years, but where companies would compete, and if they succeeded, great, good for them. Carnegie gets $250 million, which is billions and billions today. Good for him. But he didn't get huge government help or subsidies. But now what happens is a company gets even mildly successful, then they start hiring the lobbyists to get the right gatekeeping regulations and the right subsidies and the right government contracts. And that's, and when the government controls, what I say the government, when all levels of government in the United States, federal, state, and local, control 37% of all spending in the GDP, it means government has a say on almost all of sectors of the economy. Right? People don't know this, but we spend 37% of our GDP on government spends 37% of the U.S. GDP. Do you know what China spends? Less than 30. I forget what the exact number was. I think it was like 25%. China spends less money, a smaller percentage of their GDP. Their government spends a smaller percentage of their GDP than the U.S. government does. All right. So, and one more point before I get back to you, because you mentioned fascism. We're on fascism. Was never defined as the union of corporate and government, but that's kind of how it worked most of the time. Mussolini formally brought corporations into the government. Right now, Trump is bringing government into the corporations. It's basic. It's the same thing, a little different system. And I don't know. It does worry me. Yeah.
There is definitely a marriage, and ironically enough, if you actually go back and you look at some of the arguments the anti-federalists made way back when, they talked about stuff like this a long time ago, to where it's like, hey, like things that probably shouldn't meld together, which is, I don't know, you start to get this aristocracy between the Senate and the executive. You would start to get a really bad situation if you started having the government assume more of the economic situation and start to have more influence in what businesses do and what private individuals do and all of these. And these guys were talking about this so long ago, Tom, and it's incredible to me how we're still kind of at this point to where it's like, I don't know if like people want to just like deny that it's happening, or if they just don't want to see it, but it's like, clearly this marriage is happening. It has been happening for quite some time. And I do feel like that point that you did make it near the end of the article, I think it made all the sense in the world, and it was appropriately put. And we are at a situation to where, yes, like I think we can confidently say that we are not in the type of capitalism that we're intended to have. Free market is kind of perhaps a loose examination of it. We really have more of a crony capitalism. And then when you look at that fascist or that fascism aspect of it, it really kind of brings it all together. And it's like, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah,
and
that's what it is.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things, I think, that really sheds light on a problem. And I know that there's people that would push back on that, because they'll say, oh, well, that's what the left says. You're just using leftist talking points by calling it fascism, by saying that it's fascist or whatever. It's like, yeah, except the thing is like, when you examine the actual situation and you go back and you look at what fascism was, I don't know, man, like people can say what they want, but it kind of makes sense. The dots are connecting.
Yeah, I mean, all right, you don't want to use the word fascism, fine, call it cronyism, because it's government picking winners and losers in the market. That's what it is, right?
Yeah,
And there's all kinds of other terms you could use other than fascism. I think historically that's the most accurate one. I prefer to have the term economic fascism, because a lot of people say, oh well, fascism is Hitler executing Jews and one man rule. Although I don't know if a president can increase tariffs by 50% by edict. It's one man rule, pretty much, right? But I mean, if you don't like the term fascism, use another word. But that's basically what the system we're under. It's not free enterprise. It's not voluntary cooperation. It's government picking winners and losers.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's just clear signs. Obviously, things are going off the rails. And I'll make the argument so people don't have like an aneurysm. It's been going off the rails for a very long time, albeit very incrementally in some ways, somewhat explosively in other ways. But in the end of the day, what I want to put out there is people can look back. They can blame Biden. They can blame Obama. They can blame Bush. They can blame whoever it is that you want to blame. And yes, they do have their hand in a lot of things. They did help propagate and push forward a lot of very detrimental things. I would argue that, quite frankly, the last 150 years has been kind of a really bad situation in general, because we all know that when you look back at American history, there is some really sketchy stuff going on, even directly after the Constitution was put into force, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like we can make a lot of arguments, but in the end of the day, when people want to sit here and say like, oh, like it's all of these people's problem, it's like, okay, but we have to understand like who is there now, who has the ability, you had a full, basically a dominant Republican presence. You have a Republican or quote unquote Republican president, right? I'll let that sit where it does. And it's like you had the deck stacked in the favor to do great things. And as per normal, they freaking flubbed it. They did all of the things in opposition to everything that they said that they were going to do. And you can't blame that on Biden. You can't blame it on Obama. You can't blame it on Bush, on Clinton, on freaking Reagan, or whoever else. The people that are at the helm right now are the ones that need to be held responsible for the here and now. And it's like, because it's so easy to cast off blame and to say like, oh, it's their fault. I don't know, dude. I mean, last time I checked, it wasn't Barack Obama that catapulted us into a war with Iran right now and is continuing to do stupid things over in Europe and is continuing to just do ridiculous things still off in and around Venezuela and those areas, hitting drug boats. It's not Biden right now who's doing all of these ridiculous things with the economy, literally manipulating the markets with Iran, saying like, oh, peace is imminent. It's a failure of an argument before it even exists. And I think at this juncture, it's the only thing these people have, because when you sit and you listen to anything that they say, I think even they realize, Tom, that they know people know they're lying, and they just don't care. And they're hoping if they just say it enough, then we really will be in the golden age of things. And nobody believes it anymore. Well, for the exception of maybe like perhaps some of the geriatrics that still go to the
Fox Boomer cons. Yeah, you're right.
So I'll let you kind of close out on that, and we'll just start to wrap it up and just kind of get your idea of just like, man, like where do we go, I guess, essentially from here. And what should people try to do to make a difference, even just in their own state? Because there's a lot of things going on with the states right now, and there's some victories here and there in different areas. And so I think there's some healthy momentum that people can try and maybe capture. So
yeah, no, I think you're right. And one of the points I'd make is that nationally, the Republican Party has never cut the size of the federal government. I mean, at least not since the 1920s. All right. So nobody in the Republican Party alive today has participated in the cutting of the federal government at the national level. But at the state level, that's not always true. I mean, you can make a case, oh, Florida's pretty good, or one or two other states.
Yeah.
I mean, Republicans in Massachusetts obviously never really made a difference, even when they were governors. But I mean, it depends on the state. So you look at your state, maybe you do want to stay in the Republican Party. I'm a libertarian. I think the Libertarian Party is poised to explode in a good way. Usually they just explode bombs on themselves, but I think they're poised to explode in a good way, and on a national level, and maybe that'll happen, and you could get involved in the Libertarian Party or just be independent and work on specific issues. That can happen. There's all kinds of things you can do to improve your personal life as well as your community.
For sure.
And it's not all politics. A lot of it is just making sure that your life is free of all of the contamination of toxic culture and a meddling government, and making sure that your kids grow up right with the knowledge of liberty. That's 90% of the game right there. And I'm encouraged that since the year 2020, homeschooling is now 5% of the population.
Yeah, I've seen things on that.
It was less than 1% before that, and I think that's very encouraging.
Yeah, no, those are all great points, and and I just to add on that before we close it out. Also, if you have a couple minutes, I'll chat with you after the show as well.
Sure.
But if there's one piece, and you did such a great job of closing out your point there, but if there's anything I could add to it, it's like really, if you don't want to be attached, or if you don't want to be involved with a political party at all, that is fine, because there's still a lot of things that you can do. I always tell people, vote your conscience. If you still feel voting is a viable thing, which I'm never going to tell somebody like, oh, you're wrong if you think voting is a lost cause. Look, that's for you to decide. But there's still a lot of meaningful things even outside of voting that you can be a part of. You don't have to be affiliated with a political party. If you really want to make a difference, you can make that difference. You can be involved. You can change how things are. And that is one issue that I do feel, and I hope we start to see a break from this. But I feel like more than ever, and I could be wrong. I don't have the numbers on this, but just from what I've seen, a lot of people feel extremely disenfranchised from parties in general, not just the Republicans, not just the Democrats. There's a lot of people who consider themselves former libertarians, maybe still value the libertarian perspective and the principles, but and that's fine. I don't ever want to tell people you're wrong for that, because quite frankly, I don't really associate myself with the party. I like the principles and the values of libertarianism and liberty, but it is what it is. And so, there's a lot of stuff you can do. And so don't ever allow like the idea of having to be a part of a party be the thing that drives you away from making something better. And so that was a great point you made there, or great several points that you made there, Tom. And I really, really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate you coming back on to discuss the economy and really just kind of go over things. And man, who knows? Maybe one day we can get those $20 tacos and burritos down to, I don't know, 10 or 15. That would be fantastic. But we'll just keep slaving away. We'll just continue to slave away, and at the behest of apparently those who know better than us. So thank you, each and every person who has taken the time to watch the show tonight. If you ever have any questions, if you have comments, leave them down below in the comments. I will do the very best that I can to try and address those. And if you have stuff for Tom too, I can forward those, or I'm sure Tom would be willing to even just pop back on and answer them on his time as well. But we really appreciate you guys and gals for taking the time out of your busy days. All of the support is it's really immeasurable to me. I don't take a dime for this. I don't make any money off of this. I don't monetize any of my videos whatsoever. I do this because I feel like it's the right thing and it's the principled thing to do. So in the very least, if I could simply ask for a like, a share, subscribe if you like what we're doing here, and throw some comments down below. Every little bit helps, especially with YouTube. YouTube has been kind of weird again. They're doing weird things. I don't think YouTube knows what they're trying to do. So it's been confusing even for creators that I like to watch their stuff. So every little bit helps. With that being said, always carry that flame of liberty with you. Always continue to fight for what is right. Continue doing right by yourself, your family, your community, and never, ever let them take your hope away. Have a great night, and we will see you next Saturday on the Sentinels of Liberty podcast.